Under a canopy of golden light and white blossoms, a young woman in a lavender dress gripped the microphone like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her name was Lina Marill, and this was the first time she'd ever sung in front of this many people. But she had made a promise to her best friend, the bride, and today was not a day to break promises. The piano began a soft, aching melody. Lina took a breath, shaky but sure, and let her voice rise. It wasn't polished, but it was true, and as it floated over the garden, through the fairy lights, and around the crowd, silence fell. Every head turned toward her, save for one man who didn't just look. He saw her. Halfway back, a man named Rowan Thorne leaned forward, his whiskey untouched. He didn't know her, not her name, not her story, but something in the way her voice broke on the highest note made it impossible to look away. It wasn't just a performance, it was a confession. Honest, raw, unapologetically hers. As the final note faded and the applause broke like a wave, Lena's smile wobbled with relief. The bride dabbed her eyes, the guests cheered, but Rowan? He didn't clap. He couldn't. His hands were frozen. Something had shifted. A feeling he hadn't known in years had stirred, and he knew he had to meet her. Behind the tent, Lena pressed her hand to her chest, the adrenaline finally crashing over her. She'd done it. She hadn't run. She hadn't crumbled. Just then, a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Hey, didn't mean to startle you," said a girl with dark curls and a kind smile. It was Mira, the groom's cousin. "Just wanted to say you were incredible. Honestly, I think you made half the crowd cry, including the bride. Twice." Lena let out a nervous laugh. "Thanks." I was trembling the whole time. Mira handed her a water bottle. "So, bookstore by day, heart stealer by night?" Lena twisted the cap with a sheepish grin. "Yeah, something like that. Singing's just a side thing. Nothing serious." "Well, maybe it should be," Mira replied with a wink. There was a guy in the crowd who looked like he just saw a ghost. Or maybe the love of his life. Lena rolled her eyes. Highly doubtful. But later, when she returned to the reception, her eyes scanned the crowd just once. And somewhere, not far from the fairy lights, Rowan was already thinking about her voice echoing through halls he'd never imagined sharing with anyone. "You really should sing more," Mira said, nudging Lena's arm. "Some guy out there looked like he was ready to write you poetry on the spot." Lena rolled her eyes. "Okay, now you're just being dramatic." "I'm not." Tall, dark blonde hair, sitting next to a woman in a green dress. He didn't blink once. Like, literally, not once. Lena laughed it off, but when she returned to the reception, her eyes wandered across the room. She told herself she was just looking for her seat. But part of her couldn't help wondering who was he. Meanwhile, Rowan hadn't lingered. He offered polite smiles, snapped a few obligatory photos with the bride and groom, then slipped out quietly. He had a 7 a.m. strategy call the next morning, and normally that would be all he'd think about. But tonight, as his car drifted through the quiet city streets toward his penthouse, all he could picture was her, that voice. He didn't know her name, didn't know if she was single or even local. But somehow, she was already echoing in the corners of his mind, singing softly in a living room that had never known music. It was absurd. He didn't fantasize about strangers. But when he stepped into his high-rise apartment and stared out at the endless city lights, he picked up his phone anyway. "Find out who performed at the Albridge wedding tonight," he told his assistant. "Yes, Mr. Thorne." He ended the call, the skyline stretching before him. He didn't know why this mattered, but it did. Lena didn't expect anything after the wedding. She returned to her tiny walk-up in Willow Heights, juggling her 2 part-time jobs and reserving her singing for quiet nights alone. The wedding had been a beautiful fluke, a memory, that's all. Until 4 days later, when a man in a tailored black suit walked into the bookstore and asked Lena Morell, She looked up, startled. Yes? The man offered a sleek, gold-embossed card. My name is Elias. I work for Mr. Rowan Thorne. He'd like to invite you to dinner. She blinked. I'm sorry. Who? Mr. Thorne. He attended the wedding last weekend. CEO of Thorne Enterprises. Lena let out a disbelieving laugh. Is this a joke? It's not, miss. He heard you sing. He'd like to meet you properly. She stared down at the card, elegant, weighty, something that didn't belong in a bookstore. Whoever this man was, he wasn't ordinary. The restaurant was perched atop a building she'd only ever admired from the street. The hostess greeted her by name and led her to a candlelit table by the window, the skyline stretching out like a promise. Rowan was already there, rising as she approached. No? Tie? Sleeves casually rolled, but his gaze was focused, like she was the only reason the room existed. Lena, he said, extending his hand, thank you for coming. She shook it, her confusion barely masked. You really went through all this trouble because I sang a song? I didn't just hear you, he said, gesturing for her to sit. I saw you, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since. She let out a nervous laugh. That's a lot. I don't do halfway, he replied simply. The waiter arrived, smooth and silent. Rowan ordered steak for himself and sea bass for her, along with a wine she couldn't pronounce. They talked. It was awkward at first. The linen napkins, the crystal stemware, the man who ran empires, it all felt far from her world of dusty bookshelves and second-hand mugs. But he was unexpectedly easy to talk to. Direct, warm, curious in a way that didn't feel performative. She told him about the bookstore, the cramped apartment above a bakery, how she once dreamed of studying music but couldn't afford the dream. He listened, really listened. And for the first time in a long time, Lena felt like her words were being heard by someone who wouldn't just remember them, but who wanted to. Rowan spoke about his company, how he'd inherited it young, and how most people only saw the surface. The money, the status, the curated image. But beneath that, there was pressure, loneliness, expectation, the kind that didn't leave room for mistakes. By dessert, Lena was laughing, a little more relaxed, a little less guarded. You know this is crazy, right? She said, half smiling. We don't even really know each other. I'd like to change that, Rowan replied, his tone steady, sincere. If you'll let me. She looked at him, truly looked. He was out of her league. The kind of man who probably dated models with international wardrobes and a comfort level with $500 wine. But there was something about him that didn't feel far away. Something that made her feel seen, heard, wanted in a way that didn't scare her. Okay, she said quietly, let's see where this goes. And his smile. It wasn't the cold, practiced kind she expected from someone with his life. It was unguarded, gentle, real. And just like that, the girl who had once sung a single song at a stranger's wedding had unknowingly begun writing the first lines of a new story with the man who couldn't stop thinking about her. Lena had never stepped into a place like this before. The elevator opened straight into Rowan's penthouse, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. She'd been in nice spaces before, apartments with charm, lofts with good lighting. But this wasn't trying to impress. It simply was. The glass walls offered a view that swallowed the horizon. The city stretched beneath them, glowing and indifferent. Rowan had already taken off his jacket, sleeves rolled up casually. I figured we'd eat in tonight, he said without turning. Had the chef prepare something light. Lena followed slowly, trying not to gape. Everything shimmered, the counters, the floor, even the furniture. It was like the entire apartment had been sculpted out of silence and starlight. I hope you're not expecting me to be impressed by the view, she said, hanging her coat awkwardly by the door. He glanced over his shoulder, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. You're not. I'm more impressed that you own a piano with no dust on it. That's suspicious. You play? She asked, eyebrow raised. Or is that just a prop for when investors come over? He tilted his head toward the sleek black piano. Come see. She walked over, each step echoing on polished floors that probably cost more than her entire month's rent. Rowan sat at the bench like it was second nature, fingers poised, relaxed. And then he played. It wasn't perfect. He fumbled a note, didn't flinch or apologize, but the melody was tender, slow, familiar, in a way that made her throat tighten. Her voice dropped. That's what I sang. I know, he said without looking up. It's been stuck in my head since the wedding. You memorized it? I looked it up, learned it. Lena didn't know how to respond. No one had ever learned a song for her, especially not a man like Rowan Thorne. When he stopped, the silence felt heavier. Not awkward, meaningful, like neither of them knew what to do with what was growing between them. Dinner's ready, he said gently. The table had already been set, just 2 seats, soft candlelight dancing across crystal and linen. Platters of roasted vegetables, grilled halibut, and a golden risotto she couldn't name waited between them. She sat, still trying to make sense of this new world, a world that moved too fast, too high, too beautifully for her to believe it was real. But maybe, just maybe, she belonged here more than she thought. You didn't have to do all this, Lena said softly, glancing down at the perfectly plated meal between them. I know, Rowan replied, his voice calm. Then why? He looked at her directly. I'm not a fan of small talk. When I want something, I don't wait around hoping it shows up again. She hesitated. But you don't even know me. I know enough, he said, and I want to know the rest. She reached for her glass, but paused midway. What happened to you? She asked. That made you so sure all the time. Rowan didn't respond right away. Instead, he cut into his fish with deliberate precision, the silence stretching between them until he finally said, My father died when I was 19. Left me everything. No instructions, no safety net. I had to either take control or let it all slip through my hands. Lena's voice softened. And your mom? She left when I was 10. Some days I'm not sure she was ever really there. The atmosphere shifted, a quiet sadness settling in. Lena leaned back, folding her arms gently. That's a lot to carry. He nodded once. It forces clarity. You figure out fast what matters and what doesn't. She didn't speak at first. It wasn't the kind of conversation people usually had over lemon risotto and imported wine. What about you? He asked. What made you stop singing? She blinked. I didn't stop. You're not on a stage. I couldn't afford to be. Life got in the way. Money can be managed. Not by everyone, she said, the edge in her voice sharper than she meant. He stayed quiet. I could help, he said finally. The words hung in the space between them, like something fragile and dangerous. Lena set her fork down. Is that what this is? She asked. You wine and dine me, and then sponsor me? No, he said, quieter now. I want to know you. That includes knowing what you wanted, what you gave up. I didn't give it up. I just put it on hold. For how long? She looked away, until it stops hurting. He was silent for a beat, then said, I can't fix your past, but I can make room for you to dream again. Her eyes met his. Something flickered. Not trust, not yet, but something close. The beginning of it. After dinner, he offered her a ride home. She declined, saying she preferred the subway. He didn't press, just walked her to the elevator in silence. Before the doors closed, she turned to him. You don't scare me, by the way. I didn't think I did. You want too much, too fast. But that's not what scares me. I'm scared of wanting it too. He didn't smile. Then let's take it slow. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Good night, Rowan. He didn't move until the doors had closed completely. The next morning, Lena found a package on her doorstep. No note, just a slender black box tied with a white ribbon. Inside were 2 front-row tickets to a sold-out performance at Harmonia Hall by one of the most elusive sopranos in the world. A woman Lena had once written about in an old notebook she thought no one had ever seen. She hadn't told him about her, hadn't mentioned her name, but somehow Rowan had known. That evening, dressed in a borrowed gown from her best friend, Lena sat in the audience, ticket clenched between her fingers, heart pounding in rhythm with the overture. The music reached into her, deeper than she expected. By the second act, tears slipped silently down her cheeks. When the final bow came, she stepped into the aisle, and there he was, waiting. You came, she said, wiping at her eyes quickly. I wanted to see your face when she sang. I didn't tell you about her. He shrugged lightly. You keep a journal in your bag. It was open last week. I saw a line about her Milan performance. Her eyes widened. You read my journal? I read one sentence, and I remembered it. They walked outside, into the cool night air, the city buzzing quietly beneath them. He reached into his coat and handed her a soft, pale scarf, cashmere, unfamiliar. This isn't mine, she said. I had it sent here, after dinner, he replied. Figured you'd forget a coat. Lena wrapped the scarf around her shoulders. It was soft, warm, unfamiliar, like the man beside her. You're not very good at being normal, she murmured, teasing. I'm not trying to be, Rowan said simply. They stood quietly on the sidewalk, the night unusually calm, the city humming in the distance, like it was giving them space. She looked up at him, eyes full of both wonder and caution. You're not what I expected. He smiled. Neither are you. Her pulse fluttered. Traitorous. I can't fall for someone who lives in the sky, she whispered. Then I'll come down, he said. Just say the word. And for the first time since the wedding, she didn't feel like a girl trying to fit into someone else's story. She felt like someone standing at the edge of her own beginning, not because of him, but because she finally wanted to begin. The first time Lena stepped inside the Thorn Foundation, she realized 2 things. First, every inch of it had been designed to impress. Second, she suddenly felt far too aware of her shoes. The receptionist greeted her by name before she could even introduce herself. A man in a navy suit escorted her to the top floor. And when the elevator doors opened, there he was, Rowan, leaning casually against the edge of his desk, phone in one hand, but his eyes already waiting for her. You're early, he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. I didn't want to be late, she replied, smoothing her hair, trying not to feel overwhelmed. Though I might have overdressed. You didn't. His gaze lingered a second longer than necessary, slower than polite, warmer than professional. Come in. The office was striking. One wall was entirely glass, revealing the city skyline beyond. A long conference table stretched across one side, and behind his desk, carefully curated art and framed photos filled the space with quiet intentionality. This was not a room built for show, it was a space created by someone who didn't waste time, but who understood the weight of beauty when it meant something. Lena sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. I wasn't expecting an invitation to your office, she said. I thought we were still pretending this was casual. I'm not pretending, Rowan replied. I wanted you to see what I'm building. Not the investments, the real work. He opened a drawer and slid a slim folder toward her. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were photographs, some professional, some blurry and candid of children, music classes, community centers, and heartfelt handwritten letters. At the top of the page was a name she didn't recognize, the Thorn Youth Arts Initiative. I started it 6 years ago, he said. It doesn't get much press, doesn't generate returns, but it matters. She turned the pages slowly. You're funding music programs in schools that lost them, and community centers, orphanages, places where creativity was the first thing cut when things got tight. He leaned back slightly, watching her absorb it. I know what it's like to lose art when life gets in the way. Her hand paused on a crayon-written letter from a child thanking him for a cello. Her voice was quiet. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to help me grow it. She looked up, startled. You want me to work for you? I want you to help design the next phase. Expand it. Make it better. You understand music in a way my team doesn't. You need it, like I do. She stared down at the folder again. I'm not qualified. You're perfect for it. What if this changes everything between us? He stood, came around the desk, and sat on its edge beside her. It already has. Her breath caught. You're serious. I don't offer things I don't mean. She closed the folder slowly. This isn't just about music, is it? No, he said gently. It's about you. And what happens when you stop standing on the sidelines? The silence between them stretched quiet, charged, unspoken. I'll think about it, she said at last. Good, he replied. Think fast. That week, Lena said yes. It wasn't about the money, though she couldn't ignore the generous salary or the sleek new laptop that arrived at her door less than a day later. It was about purpose, about waking up and knowing she was part of something that mattered. And though she didn't want to admit it, part of it was about him too. Rowan didn't hover. He wasn't the type to micromanage. But he had an uncanny instinct. He always knew when to check in, when to step back, when to challenge her, just enough to make her rise. After a month of working together, they found a rhythm. Not forced, not discussed, just natural. It stayed that way until one evening when she was finishing up a proposal for a new outreach program in Queens. She had just closed her laptop when Rowan appeared at her door, coat in hand. There's something I want to show you. I'm in jeans and a sweater, she said, looking down. This isn't gallery ready. You'll be fine, he said with a smile. He wasn't wrong. The gallery was tucked between a wine bar and a florist in Soho. When they stepped inside, she realized it wasn't a public event. The space was empty, except for an older man adjusting lights at the back. Rowan greeted him with a quiet handshake and then led Lena to the center of the room. The painting was massive, 7 feet tall, framed in deep wood. It showed a woman standing at the edge of a windswept shoreline, her hair wild, eyes closed, mouth open as if singing into the storm. The colors were heavy with emotion. Stormy, restless, the brushstrokes soft, yet filled with movement. Somehow it felt alive. She reminds me of you, Rowan said beside her. Lena didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice was caught somewhere in her chest. The artist's name is Varela, he continued. He paints women he's never met, visions, concepts, feelings. People wait years to commission a piece. She turned to him slowly. You bought this. I commissioned it, he said. When? 3 weeks after the wedding. She blinked, stunned. You didn't even know me. I knew enough to want the rest. Her throat tightened. Rowan, I'm not asking you to say anything back, he said gently. I just want you to understand this isn't temporary. You're not a passing thought. You're not a song I heard once and forgot. The room held its breath. I don't know how to be what you're used to, she said quietly. I don't want what I'm used to. Her fingers brushed the edge of the painting's frame. No one's ever seen me like this. Then they weren't really looking. She turned to him, her eyes shining part fear, part wonder. You make it really hard to keep this simple. I've never cared for simple. That night, she didn't go home. They didn't rush anything. There was no performance, no urgency, just quiet conversation on the terrace of his penthouse, shared laughter, wine, and the soft realization that whatever was between them, it had already taken root. The next morning, she stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the early city haze dissolve into daylight. "You're not afraid anymore," Rowan said as he stepped behind her. "I'm still afraid," she replied, leaning into him. "I'm just not running from it." He wrapped his arms around her. "Then stay. I'm not going anywhere." But not everything could remain untouched. Later that week, while preparing a presentation for the foundation, Lena opened an old email account, one she hadn't checked in months. It was the one she used back when she still submitted demo recordings, back when she still believed someone might actually listen. And there it was, a message. They'd come across a clip of her singing at the wedding. Someone had recorded it and posted it online. The video had quietly made its way across the internet, gathering views, shares, comments, and now they wanted to meet her. Lena stared at the email for a long time, the blinking cursor at the bottom of the screen daring her to believe it. When she finally told Rowan, he didn't look surprised. "I wondered when someone would notice," he said gently. "You knew? I saw the video the night it went up. It's been viewed over 200,000 times." Her breath caught. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because this has to be yours," he said, "not mine. I didn't want to influence your decision." She pressed her fingers to her forehead. "This changes everything." "No," Rowan said softly. "It just makes the future bigger." "What about the foundation? The work I've started here?" "It'll still be here. And so will I." She looked at him, her chest tight. "I don't want to lose this, you won't. But you can't quiet yourself again just because you're scared of what it might change." She swallowed hard. "What if I fail?" He stepped forward and gently touched her cheek. "Then I'll be the one, clapping the loudest when you try again." As the fear swelled in her chest, something else pushed up beside it. Hope. She nodded slowly, then whispered, "Okay." And just like that, the girl who had once sung a single song at a wedding took her first real step toward the life she thought she'd left behind. Not because someone opened a door for her, but because someone reminded her she still had the voice to knock. The rooftop garden at the Lyric Pavilion took her breath away. Below her, the city shimmered in tones of gold and violet, the skyline rising sharp against the dusk. Lanterns swayed from arches wrapped in ivy, and a string quartet played something slow and luminous, like music woven from air itself. It was the official launch of the Thorn Youth Arts Initiative expansion, a project Lena had helped build brick by brick over the past 4 months. And tonight, it wasn't just an idea anymore. It was real. A national tour, a scholarship fund, fully funded music programs in more than 30 schools. And her name was listed beside Rowan's on every banner, every invitation, every press release. She hadn't known about that last part until the announcement went live. Rowan had kept it quiet. A surprise. She felt him before she heard him. "You're late," he said behind her, voice low and warm. Lena turned, heart skipping. He wore a navy tuxedo tailored so perfectly it seemed part of him. His hair was combed neatly, except for one rebellious strand at his temple that refused to behave. "I was checking the soundboard," she said. "The speakers were too sharp. They fixed it." "Of course you checked the soundboard. You asked me to run the program. I asked you to run it," he said with a quiet smile, "not work yourself into the ground." She lifted a brow. "Are you suggesting I relax?" "I'm suggesting," he said, holding out his hand, "you let someone else take care of things. Just for tonight." She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. He guided her toward the center of the terrace, where guests were gathered beneath the canopy of lights, donors, artists, teachers, students, even a few celebrities. But when they saw her, the crowd shifted. The applause started. Not for him, for her. As Lena stepped onto the terrace with Rowan, something shifted. The crowd parted. Applause rose, not for him, for her. She froze, startled by the sound, by the faces turned toward her, with warmth and admiration. She felt suddenly unsteady. Rowan leaned toward her ear. "You earned this," he whispered. "Every second of it." She swallowed hard and stepped forward. The MC took the mic and called her name. Before she could even process it, she was standing under a spotlight, hundreds of eyes watching her, not as an assistant or a guest, but as someone who had built something. Her voice didn't shake. "I used to think music was something you had to chase alone," she began, "something that disappeared when life got too loud. But I was wrong." She glanced toward Rowan. "Music doesn't leave. Sometimes it just waits for someone to hear it again. And because of this program, because of all of you, thousands of students will get the chance to hear it. Maybe for the first time." Their eyes met across the terrace. He gave her the smallest nod. "And if I've learned anything," she said, her voice softer now, "it's that the right people don't just hear your voice. They make space for it." The applause this time was quieter, but it carried more weight. It wasn't polite, it was real. And as she stepped down from the stage, her heart was full of something she didn't quite have a name for yet. But it was good. It was hers. After the speeches, the energy shifted. The rooftop came alive with dancing, nothing formal or rehearsed. Just joy. Pure and untamed, music flowed like champagne, and laughter echoed beneath the lights. Lena moved through the crowd, hugging donors, thanking volunteers, laughing with students who had flown in from cities like Detroit and Charlotte to perform. Their excitement was infectious. For a moment, she forgot to be cautious. She just felt happy. Near the bar, she spotted Rowan deep in conversation with an elegant woman in a crimson gown. Her silver hair swept into a chignon, every inch of her poised and powerful. Lena didn't interrupt. She waited. When Rowan noticed her, he excused himself and crossed the floor. "Are you hiding?" he asked, his voice light. "I'm recharging," she said. "Come with me." Before she could ask where, he took her hand and led her down a narrow hallway and up a spiral staircase she hadn't noticed before. At the top was a small room surrounded by glass walls. A single grand piano stood in the center, bathed in the soft light of the city below. It was so still. It felt sacred. She stepped inside slowly, as though even her breath might disturb the silence. "I bought this building 3 years ago," Rowan said behind her, closing the door. "I kept this space untouched. I didn't know why at the time." Her fingers traced the piano lid. "I think you did." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart caught. "Rowan." He didn't open it. Not yet. "I've spent most of my life trying to control everything," he said. "My company, my image, my heart, and then you walked into that wedding and sang like you'd never been told to be quiet." He stepped closer. "You didn't ask for attention. You didn't want it. But you had it. You had me." She looked down, overwhelmed, her breath shaky. "You didn't just impress me, Lena. You undid me. You reminded me what it feels like to want something without needing a plan. To feel something without analyzing it to death." He paused, searching her face. "I didn't fall in love with you because you're talented or brave or brilliant, though you are all of those things. I fell in love with you because you make the world feel like it's worth slowing down for." Her breath trembled. "I don't want to be the man who watches your life from a balcony," he continued. "I want to be beside you. Every note, every risk, every silence." Then, finally, he opened the box. Inside was a single, emerald-cut diamond set in platinum. Elegant, clear, no embellishments, no distractions. "I'm not asking you to leave your music," he said. "I'm asking if I can be part of the song." Lena stared at the ring, then at him. Her voice was quiet, but steady. You didn't need to bring me to a rooftop to do this. I didn't want to do it anywhere else. Lena reached into the velvet box and took the ring herself, holding it delicately between her fingers. Then, without ceremony, but with absolute certainty, she slid it onto her hand. Rowan exhaled, almost laughing in disbelief. That's a yes? She smiled softly. Yes, she whispered. That's a yes. He pulled her into his arms, and the kiss that followed wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was reverent, quiet, like something sacred was being promised between them, without a single word. There was no audience, no applause, just breath, warmth, and the unmistakable sense that something irreversible had just been spoken. When they finally pulled apart, Lena leaned her head against his chest. Promise me something, she murmured. Anything, no matter what changes. We keep choosing each other, even when it gets messy. He kissed her temple, his voice steady, especially when it's messy. Outside, the music from the gala carried on. The city below continued to move. But in that quiet glass room above it all, two people stood still, no longer strangers from a wedding, no longer afraid of what might be. They were something new, a beginning. A girl who once sang quietly in the shadows of her life, and the man who heard her and never stopped listening. The late spring sun poured through the windows of the newly opened Thorne Youth Arts Center, catching the soft sheen of polished floors and the vibrant mural stretching across the atrium wall. Laughter echoed from an upstairs classroom. Young voices lifted in play, and somewhere deeper in the building, violins hummed through their tuning. The center wasn't just finished. It was alive. Lena stood barefoot in her office, a mug of coffee warming her hands, staring at a framed photo on the wall. A student holding a cello, eyes beaming with pride, oversized headphones balanced on his small head, and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. Behind him, scrawled in colorful marker on the whiteboard, music gave me my voice. She hadn't cried during the ribbon cutting, not during the mayor's speech, not even when the students performed the original piece composed by the first class of scholarship recipients. But now, in the calm after the whirlwind, the weight of it rose up like a tide. Then came a soft knock on the door. Rowan leaned in, sleeves pushed up, tie long, forgotten, that familiar crease between his brows, the one that appeared only when he was trying to hide how much something mattered. You skipped the press debrief, he said, stepping inside. I thought maybe you ran off. She set her mug down and turned toward him. I just needed a moment. He studied her for a breath. You okay? I'm more than okay, she said, walking into his arms. I just didn't expect this to feel so final. He rested his hand at the back of her neck. It's not final. It's the first chapter, she nodded against him. Still. It's strange. For so long, I thought I'd never get here. And now I'm standing in an office with my name on the door, and it feels like at any second, someone's going to walk in and say there's been a mistake. They won't. He kissed her forehead, grounding her. You're here because you built this, not alone. No, he said, pulling her closer. But without you, none of it would have mattered. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at it. It's the music director from the touring program. He wants to lock in the showcase dates. Let it wait, Rowan said. He picked up the phone, turned it face down, then gently tilted her chin up with 2 fingers. Lena leaned into him with a sigh. You always know when I need to be pulled back. No, he murmured. I've just learned how to listen when you're not saying it out loud. They stayed like that, wrapped in stillness. The only sound was the soft echo of footsteps passing in the hallway outside the door. Then she pulled back, eyes thoughtful. There's one more thing I want to do today. He raised an eyebrow. Tell me. She smiled. I want to go back. Back where? She didn't answer. 2 hours later, They stood in front of the little bookstore where Lena had once spent her mornings unpacking boxes and her evenings gazing through the display window, like it held the outline of a future she wasn't sure she'd ever reach. It hadn't changed much. The paint was still chipped along the side panel, and the bell above the door rang with its familiar, tired wheeze. Inside, the same scent greeted her aged paper and cinnamon tea. The shop's owner spotted her and rushed forward, wrapping her in a hug that smelled like memory. "I saw you on the news," she whispered, eyes bright. "You looked like a woman who finally caught her breath." Lena laughed, the sound warm and soft. "Maybe I did." While she chatted and caught up, Rowan wandered the aisles, fingers brushing the worn spines of books she used to shelve. She found him 10 minutes later in the poetry section, holding a slim volume open in his hands. "You used to read this one?" he said, handing it to her. "I remember you quoted it once." She looked down at the page. It was a poem about belonging not to places or people, but to moments that change you. "I didn't think you remembered that." "I remember everything." Later, as the sky melted into lavender and the city exhaled into evening, they walked hand in hand through the small park near her old apartment. A jazz trio played near the fountain, and a little girl in a tutu darted past them, trailing ribbons behind her like a comet. "You know," Lena said, watching the girl dance, "there was a time when I thought this was all I'd ever have. Window shopping dreams, secondhand books, singing to no one." Rowan stopped walking. "And now," she turned to him, "now I have a front row seat to my own life, and someone to share it with." He pulled her closer, his voice low. "There's something I haven't told you." She tilted her head. "What is it?" "I bought the brownstone." She blinked. "What brownstone?" "The one across from the music school, in the West Village. The one you always glance at when we drive by." Her lips parted. "You bought it?" "I did. And I had the top floor turned into a soundproof studio. Why? Not because I expect you to use it every day, but because I never want you to feel like you have to ask for space to create." She stared at him, stunned. "You did all that without telling me?" "I wanted it to be ready," he said, "for when you were." Lena didn't answer, not with words. She kissed him, slow, certain, as if anchoring herself in a truth she no longer needed to question. That night, they stood in the center of the brownstone's living room, no furniture yet, just empty walls, echoing floors, and endless possibility. She wandered through each room, barefoot again, just like the first time she'd stepped into his penthouse. But this place? This wasn't a castle in the clouds. This was home. As she passed the hallway, Rowan caught her hand and gently pulled her back toward him. "We'll fill it with whatever you want," he said. "Music, paintings, silence, laughter. We can host dinners," Rowan said, "or disappear from the world when we need to." He reached for her hand. "It's yours as much as it's mine." Lena smiled, her voice low and sure. "You know what I want? Tell me." Curtains that dance in the breeze. A kitchen with a record player, mismatched mugs, and a piano bathed in morning sunlight. He brushed his thumb gently along her jaw. "Then we'll have all of that." They didn't rush to move in. They didn't need to. Instead, they took their time. Slowly, piece by piece, the house became theirs. Lena found secondhand chairs with faded upholstery and stories stitched into the seams. Rowan installed a coffee machine that ground beans exactly the way she liked. They argued over paint colors, agreed on lighting, laughed through every imperfect moment in between. He filled the fridge with her favorite snacks before every trip she came home from. She slipped love notes into the books he read late at night. And the studio on the top floor, once just a quiet room, became something more. A refuge, a canvas, a place where she met the parts of herself she had once tucked away, believing they weren't needed. Her music changed. It no longer clawed to be heard. Now, it simply spoke. When her album came out the following spring, it didn't go viral. It wasn't everywhere, but it was enough. It found its way into the hands of those who needed it most. Played softly in kitchens late at night, in headphones, on long walks, in quiet rooms, where someone was simply trying to feel less alone. And through it all, Rowan stayed, not as a savior, not as someone who needed to fix her, but as her partner. The man who had once sat quietly in the back of a garden wedding, and who now stood front and center, never asking her to shrink, never needing her to shine in any way other than her own. They didn't rush into forever. They didn't need to. Because love, they had learned, wasn't a race. It was a rhythm. One warm summer evening, they sat on the rooftop of their brownstone, feet tangled under string lights, wine glasses forgotten beside them. The breeze was soft, the city quiet. Lena reached for his hand. "I still remember what you said," she whispered, "about wanting to be part of the song." He looked at her. No hesitation, no fear, just presence. "I meant it." She smiled, something tender in her chest. "Then let's write the next verse." And so they did. Not perfectly, not always easily, but truthfully, together. Because sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the quietest places: a bookstore, a rooftop, a single song. And sometimes healing doesn't come in grand gestures, but in small ones. In the kind of love that lets you take your time, the kind that sees you fully, the kind that stays. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for letting this story live in your heart, even just for a little while. At Shining Stories, we believe in the quiet power of connection, the kind that comes from a single sentence, a shared silence, or a song that lingers long after it ends. If this story touched you, even in the smallest way, we're honored. And if you're carrying your own quiet dreams, may this be your reminder. It's never too late to begin, to return, or to believe again. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey.